Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Arlene Diamco, the Multidimensional MD. Thank you so much for joining me here. This is take two because I updated the link, and here we are. And as always, every week I will meditate on what to talk about. Sometimes it will be something more esoteric, energetic, emotional. Other times it will be something more into the detail, like the chemistry, the nutrition, supplements. So today I thought I would talk about dietary fats and give a nice overview on it, because I've heard people talking about it over the last few weeks. And sometimes when they're saying certain terms, I know that they don't actually understand like the categorization of all the different dietary fats and fatty acids. So I'm going to go through an overview for you so you can understand that. And in general, we aren't going to talk about things in necessarily as good or bad, although there is one exception to that. And if I'm going to start with the energetic first, actually. Usually I talk about it later, but when I was thinking about fats and what they do for our body, I thought of it as this: they're so important for our cell membranes. They help to make the membranes more fluid or help with that integrity of the cell membrane. So every cell in our body needs fats. And it helps with the communication of protein signaling and the cells communicating to each other. It also helps with wrapping the axons of the nerves. So it helps to insulate the nerves so that the messages that the nerves send through electricity don't short circuit, so that your nerves can communicate better. So in thinking about those aspects of fat, and they also give us some energy, but there's this aspect, this energetic aspect of creating some sort of safe boundary. They're also really good for our immune system. So they can be, especially in proper ratios. And that immune system is yourself versus other. So it's an understanding of proper boundaries, safe, that integrity of like what your being is, the integrity of your cells, and also communication. So being able to communicate well. And so with that in mind, I wanted to talk about healthy fats and again, not to categorize like exactly them into good or bad, but we are going to go through what saturated fats versus trans fats versus monosaturated and polyunsaturated fats are, what are omega-3s versus omega-6s, and why all that matters. And our body needs these fats, again, for our nerves, for our brains, for our cell membranes, but we also need it for hormones, including cortisol, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So if you have adrenal fatigue or other hormonal imbalances, then listen to this, because you may need to balance some of those fat ratios and your intake of them. Also go through certain illnesses that could benefit from adjusting what fats you're eating. So with that, we're going to get started with hydrogenated and trans fats. So to understand this hydrogenation process, let me show you a picture here. One second. And you can see here, these are fats. And if you see those long tails, each one of those is a fatty acid. And then it is attached to this glycerin backbone. And so that makes it a fat. So fatty acids plus the glycerin makes it a fat. So when we look at this, at the top fat there, and it has linoleic acid, it has those two lines there that show a double bond. And so that is an unsaturated fat. And since it has more than one double bond, that is a polyunsaturated fat. And then you have there that oleic acid that has one double bond there. So that's called a monounsaturated fat. A saturated fat would be that stearic acid, if you see on the bottom, the two. So you see they have all single bonds. So that squiggly tail is completely full with hydrogen atoms. So in the hydrogenation process, what they are trying to do is to to put more hydrogen atoms onto these fatty acid tails. So we'll change those double bonds to single bonds. And it may not be a complete process. So a complete process of hydrogenation would be completely saturated there. That would be that stearic acid. And a partial hydrogenation would change that linoleic acid, those two double bonds, and makes it only just one double bond. So it changes it from the linoleic acid that you see on the top to the oleic acid that you see in the bottom there. So in the bottom left hand, then you see that oleic acid, but on the bottom right hand, you can also hydrogenate it to become oleic acid. So what is the difference there? So you can see in the structure, there's something bent there in that double bond. It makes a completely different shape. So that oleic acid is actually a trans fat versus that oleic acid is a monounsaturated fat in olive oil. So the cis, this is a cis orientation that is more natural in that monounsaturated fat. And then that trans orientation, when they hydrogenated, that is trans, or makes more like an S shape. So why is this important? So the shape of the molecule actually affects all of its properties, from the melting point to the boiling point to its physiology, how it communicates, how it interacts with your body. So trans fats are mostly artificial in the foods. So when they hydrogenate vegetable oils, that linoleic acid, and they turn it into trans fats, it's more stable because it has more saturated bonds there. And so the double bonds are more at risk for oxidation and turning. So it makes it more shelf stable. So that's why companies want to make trans fats. Unfortunately, it is the worst fat for you. So if we were to label, I don't like to label things as like good or bad, but for trans fats, these are the worst fats for you, and completely avoid these as much as you can. Now, there are some trans fats that are naturally occurring in nature. These are from animals when they eat grass. That grass is digested by the bacteria in their stomachs. And so there can be some what they call ruminant trans fats in animals that are grass-fed. So those are natural trans fats and not harmful in small amounts. However, these artificial trans fats that are made by altering vegetable oils are the worst kind of fat that you can eat. It increases your risk for heart disease and other cardiovascular diseases and alters your lipid ratios in a very unhealthy way. So even when I was in medical school, this was not clear to me because I was still making pie crust with Crisco shortening, which has tons of trans fats in it. And I guess it just wasn't impressed on me enough that we should not be eating trans fats. If you look at the food labels, then you can see if there are any trans fats in food. It will be in processed food, so crackers, cookies, pies, even some breads. So make sure you read the ingredient list. On the food label, it will say fats and it will say an amount of trans fats. However, the companies are allowed to round to zero if there is less than 0.5 grams of trans fats. So less than 500 milligrams of trans fats, it can round it down to zero. So it could say zero trans fats when it still actually has up to, say, 499 milligrams. So if you read in the label that there's any hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated vegetable oils or fats, then you know for sure that product has trans fats in it, and get something else that's more organic or has something else, has another healthy alternative to that fat. So next, we're going to talk about saturated fats. So if you remember when I showed you that picture, the saturated fats are that stearic acid. So it has all single bonds there and that wiggly chain. It doesn't have any double line in that long chain. And so saturated fats are mostly found in animal-based foods like beef, pork, butter, cream, milk, eggs. It's also in coconut and palm oil, although the composition is different. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But when you when you eat any of these products, they're supposed to be in much smaller amounts. And if you've listened to my podcast on the alkaline diet, and I talk a lot about Edgar Casey's recommendations for an alkaline diet, then these kinds of foods are really supposed to be eaten in much smaller amounts. You can have some saturated fats, and Edgar Casey says also it's fine if you can eat dairy. Sure, you can have a little bit of butter or ghee, but you're not supposed to consume them again in large amounts. A little bit, however, eaten with some vegetables can enhance your assimilation of the nutrients from vegetables. So, so that's why we put things like dressing on our veggies and salads. It makes them taste better, but also helps us to get more nutrients out of it. So even saturated fats aren't necessarily good or bad. And I have seen in terms of if we do like blood tests and to look at your profile of fats in your body, in your blood, I have seen kids like needing all kinds of fats, even fats that we might label more as bad, like saturated fats. So the reason for that is saturated fats are, they can change your lipid profile in terms of your lipid labs, but you do need a little bit. And I've seen kids that have been low in it just because they were really picky and maybe they're a vegetarian or vegan and didn't really get many of those kinds of fats in their diet. So again, your brain needs it. You need it for all different reasons, but you don't need very much. So now moving on, we will go to medium chain triglycerides and fatty acids. So again, medium chain triglycerides are a kind of saturated fat. So I can show you a picture here. So this is a picture of linoleic. I'm sorry. This is, let me move that there. This is a picture of lauric acid, which is found in coconut oil and palm kernel oil in high amounts. So medium chain fats, fatty acids, triglycerides, again, are a kind of saturated fat or fatty acid, but they are found more in coconut oil and palm kernel oil. So there are certain benefits that you can get from medium chain fatty acids, medium chain triglycerides that you won't get from the longer chain saturated fats. So if you can see here in this tail, their medium chain triglycerides have about 6 to 12 carbon length of their chain. So if you see all those C's there, that's the tail that I'm talking about. So if it's about 6 to 12 carbon atoms long, then that's going to be a medium chain fatty acid. So let me show you here again. Okay, so coconut oil is about 90% saturated fat and 9% unsaturated fat. But 60% of that totally fatty acid content is the medium chain fatty acids. And about half of that is that lauric acid, MCT, that I showed you. So the others will be other kinds of fats. However, that medium chain triglyceride has certain properties that can be beneficial for you. It can have antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral properties. So you can think about that if you have trouble fighting off certain infectious diseases, or even if you have parasites or candida, or just feel like you're getting frequent colds. So you might think about needing more medium chain triglycerides. So you could use more coconut oil in your cooking. It's also a good source of energy because MCTs go straight to your liver to metabolize quickly, and you can access that energy, and it doesn't get stored like those long chain fatty acids do. So I know there's some controversy over this in the medical literature and in terms of like different physician opinions. So some people feel that medium chain triglycerides are not great for you because they are still saturated fats and they will alter in high amounts, they will alter your lipid profile on labs. So if you're at a high risk for cardiovascular disease, then maybe you don't want to consume large amounts of medium chain triglycerides. But again, consider what your needs are. And if you are having trouble fighting off infection, then I would say that you might need it. Or if you're an athlete and you need that quick energy, then you might consider using coconut oil instead of some of these other fatty acids. So versus the other kinds of saturated fats like butter or lard, cream. So I hope that is clear for you. And if anything is not clear here, please let me know because I would like to clarify for you. So now we're going to talk about monounsaturated fats. So monounsaturated fats are the kinds of fats that you find in olive oil, avocado oil. You can also find it in certain nuts and seeds like almonds, walnuts, cashews, pistachios, pumpkin seeds. Olive oil is the #1 oil recommended in the Edgar Cayce readings for health benefits. So by far, if I use any oil for cooking, it is a cold pressed olive oil, that extra virgin olive oil. And I'll use it for dressings. I'll put it on my skin. I will make like home remedies out of it. Now, we aren't really supposed to eat fried foods or use higher temperature for cooking, but if you do need to use a higher temperature for cooking anything, then my first choice would be avocado oil because it can withstand higher temperatures in terms of its smoking point than olive oil can. But again, higher temperature cooking isn't necessarily the best, and we definitely want to avoid fried foods, but you have that there for you. Because if you cook with high heat with olive oil or some other like really delicate oils, then it will change the oil, so it will be less healthy for you. So olive oil, we know, helps to reduce, again, cardiovascular disease and cancer risk and can improve insulin sensitivity. So all of these more healthy fats and fatty acids will have that property of be helping your cardiovascular risk, help with cancer risk, and improve your metabolism. And I'll talk about more about health benefits for omega-3s in just a moment. So now I'm going to go over polyunsaturated fats. So polyunsaturated fats include omega-3s and omega-6s. And I'm going to show you a picture here. So let me remove the tile there so you can see it. So here are now, this picture is a picture of omega-3s. And omega-3s by far are much healthier for us than omega-6s. And I'll explain this in just a moment here. So omega-3s and omega-6s are both polyunsaturated fats. And if you see this picture here again, polyunsaturated fats include this top one, the linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 fatty acid. See how it has more than one double bond there? So that makes it polyunsaturated, PUFAs. Now, not all PUFAs are bad. And in fact, both that linoleic acid and alpha linoleic acid, which is an omega-3, are both important and essential for your body, meaning we have to eat them from our diet to be able to have them. Our bodies cannot produce them. Now, omega-6s, humans are evolved to have about 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6 fatty acids to omega-3s. Omega-6s are found in soybean, canola, safflower, peanut, sunflower, the seeds and the oils. So there are so many processed foods that are using these kinds of oils. And that's why we are just inundated with omega-6 fatty acids and has thrown our health off and really created more inflammation in the body because the ratio is far off. Now, again, we need some omega-6 fatty acids. It's not that we're supposed to have zero. We are just having way too much. So the healthy ratio that they said that we're evolved to have is 1-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio. In the United States, the ratio is about 15-to-1 or to 16, almost 17-to-1 of omega-6s to omega-3 ratio. So we are so far off. And we are seeing those effects in this country with increases in chronic diseases, cardiovascular, cancer, all kinds of things. So we need to increase the amount of omega-3s that we get. So omega-3s are found in fish, including wild salmon, tilapia, skipjack tuna. Those are all fish that are lower in mercury. They can also be found in chia seeds, flax seeds, Brussels sprouts, spinach, cauliflower, walnuts. So keep that in mind. And so let's take a look at this picture of the omega-3s again. So we have our alpha linoleic acid, different than alpha lipoic acid, which is an antioxidant. Alpha linoleic acid, that is an omega-3, and that is found in vegan sources, so vegetables, nuts, and seeds. We also have EPA and DHA shown there. So you can see these all have more than one double bond, so that's why they're considered polyunsaturated fatty acids. And EPA and DHA are found from fish sources, so animal sources. And if you count from here, from the right side, you can count from the carbon atoms, 1, 2, 3. And you can see in that ALA at the top, it's circled there, that third carbon atom. And that's why it's called omega-3, because that's where the first double bond is. Versus if we went back to the picture here of that top a fatty acid there, that linoleic acid, that's an omega-6 fatty acid. And so here, each of those corners is a carbon. So if you counted from the very edge of that right side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then you can start to understand the nomenclature of like why that's called an omega-6 fatty acid. So little details for you, for those of you that like a little bit more of that biochemistry. But if we, there are so many studies that have found that if we just bring our ratio down for how much omega-6s to omega-3s that we are getting, and if we can get closer to that one-on-one, you don't even have to be one-on-one, but there are studies finding if you have a ratio of 4-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3s, that is associated with a 70% decrease in mortality from cardiovascular disease. Do you know how significant that is? 70%. So if you know anyone with heart disease, cardiovascular disease, really emphasize to them the importance of shifting the ratios. It's not good or bad. It's just having a proper ratio so that your physiology can function well. So in patients with colorectal cancer, they found that a ratio of 2.5 to 1 also was helpful in reducing the cancer proliferation, so the growth of the cancer cells. So now it needed a more strict ratio there, so they found 2.5 to 1, because they found like a ratio of 4 to 1, which was really helpful for cardiovascular disease, wasn't quite effective for reducing the cancer cell proliferation for colorectal cancer. So that's interesting. So that's why I'm saying like just getting as close to that 1-to-1 ratio as possible. And in breast cancer, they found that they also needed that lower omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, was associated with a decreased risk in breast cancer and rheumatoid arthritis as well. So in asthma, they found that a 5-to-1 ratio benefited versus if it was twice that, 10-to-1, it had adverse consequences to asthma. So that we are seeing all these different kinds of illnesses that could benefit from switching your ratio to closer to that 1-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3s. So if we were to look at the health benefits of omega-3s, so some of them I've already mentioned. Again, it can be difficult to know in the food labels of how much trans fats there are. And if you're looking at the food labels, then you want to see what kinds of oils it has in there. So does it have soybean, canola, safflower, peanut, or sunflower oil? That's going to be omega-6s. Does it have any chia seeds, flax seeds, or walnuts, then you'll have some more omega-3s. But you also have that through vegetarian sources like Brussels sprouts, spinach, and cauliflower. Now, I want to show you that picture of the different kinds of omega-3s again. So you have your ALA, EPA, and DHA. Now, ALA is definitely essential for your body, meaning that you must get it through food sources. EPA and DHA are kind of conditionally essential, meaning you can create EPA and DHA from ALA in your body, but the process is not that efficient. So unless you're consuming large amounts of ALA, then you may not actually have enough EPA and DHA to be in their more active form that your body needs. So if you are deficient in it, then you might need to supplement or start getting omega-3s from fish sources. It's just a consideration. But if you are vegan or vegetarian, it's okay. You can still get a large amount through chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds. And so if you made like a chia seed pudding with 1 to 2 tablespoons of chia seeds, you could mix that with your coconut milk or almond milk, hemp milk, whatever milk that you would like. I would say about half a cup to 1 tablespoon of chia seed, and you can mix it in all kinds of things. And so if you get enough ALA, then you can convert that to EPA DHA. So it really just depends on what your needs are and how you eat and what your preferences are. So lots of variation there. And just looking at those omega-3 health benefits, again, cancer prevention, including breast cancer and colorectal cancer, can also decrease your risk for Alzheimer's disease, dementia, cognitive function, can decrease your risk for age-related macular degeneration, and also decrease your risk for dry eye. So if you have any of these things, definitely take a look at your diet, seeing if you're getting enough omega-3s, seeing if you need to reduce the amount of processed food and omega-6s that you're getting. If you want, you could check your blood and see what your profile is, and see from there if you need to look at something to kind of know what you need. More omega-3s will also decrease the risk of rheumatoid arthritis. It's also helpful for depression, inflammatory bowel disease, ADHD, childhood allergies, and cystic fibrosis. So there are so many health benefits, and we've just kind of like spanned so many different kinds of illnesses. And again, why does this matter? The shape affects the physiology and the function. So that's why the saturated versus the unsaturated versus the monosaturated versus the polyunsaturated makes a difference. And if you look at that molecular level, then you can kind of see why that does make a difference in how it functions and how it shapes and how it helps with protein signaling and how it helps to make the cell membranes more fluids. So we will need those omega-3s to help with the cell membrane integrity, but also to make the membranes more fluid and less tense and help with the protein signaling. So just to recap what I was talking about in the beginning, because you want more fluidity. The health is in the flow. So if we have these proper ratios, then it helps have our cells have more fluidity. It helps our cell membranes have more fluidity, and it helps our bodies, our nerves to communicate better, so that we have more fluidity in connection and how we're communicating. And so we can take that from a micro level, and then we expand it out into a macro level in terms of like, are we able to move our bodies? And so then you see that in rheumatoid arthritis, because then you get swelling in a joint and not getting that fluidity of the joints, and you have this tension in your overall body, and you're not getting that fluidity in your overall movement. And you think about your cognition. So it's helpful in ADHD and dementia and being able to think more clearly, helpful for brain fog, so that your nerves can communicate more clearly and that you can communicate more clearly with other people and connect with other people with clear boundaries. So not being so open that you don't understand how you're affected by the world. So this is very important for people that are like highly sensitive or more empathic. So I'm recapping what I was talking about in the beginning. The fats are very important for our boundaries, our messaging, our communication. And so if you don't have those proper ratios, then you can think about it on the macro level, and then the macro level and the micro level. So I think about it in terms of the energetics as well. How are we with our boundaries? How are we communicating with people? How are we with with knowing what's us versus other, and what do we need to fight off, what is healthy for us. Like, are we over responding? Like, our boundaries are we're we're overreactive to the world, and so that we are creating too many antibodies and overreacting like that, or are our boundaries like too open and we don't really know what to fight off, and it gets all mixed up, and then you get into autoimmune diseases or infectious diseases. So I know it's sort of looking at it in a different way, but that's how I like to look at it, from a multidimensional perspective, so that you have this understanding when you look even from different perspectives, but also from the micro to the macro, that it makes sense in so many different ways. So I hope that helps you in some way. And thank you for being here with me. Thank you for joining with me. If you have any questions, or if anything is not clear in what I've said, please leave a comment. Let me know. I would love to hear from you. I am just talking to my computer and I never know who's joining me. So like and subscribe, leave me a comment, let me know. If you want to follow me or connect with me in other ways, you can on Instagram at All Worlds Health, on Facebook, All Worlds Health and Pediatrics. On my website, allworldshealth.com, I'll send an e-love letter out every week on Wednesday, and I'll come back here next Wednesday, sometime in the middle of the day. It's gotten so busy with my family, so sometimes I'm not able to make it in the morning, and thanks for being patient with me. I'm glad to see you here. So lots of love to you. I believe in you, so I hope that you believe in you too. And I'll see you next week, another episode of the Multidimensional MD. Have a beautiful rest of your week. Take care. Bye.